I'm so honored to be joined by former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Mr. Prime Minister, I don't know if you've ever had technical failures on your watch. I did read the COVID section pretty closely, so there were obviously things that bothered you about technology in the COVID failure, but I don't know if you ever had the BBC go down like this, and we're not even publicly owned. How are you?
How are you, Mr. Hewitt? Hugh, it's great to be on your show. Thank you very much for having me. Look, I mean,
It
we
is
had all
great.
sorts
I
of
enjoyed Unleashed tremendously. But I got to tell you, you're going to have to translate a few things for me. When Donald Trump took out Soleimani, you said he played a blinder. What does that mean for the benefit of your American audience?
So he played a blindingly good innings. It was dazzling. It was like watching the sun rise. It's an expression from sport. You play a blinder when you score a lot of runs, or you score a try that so what he did was, everybody was freaking out about this guy Qasem Soleimani being basically vaporized, if you recall, and they were saying, this was my diplomats in the foreign office saying, oh well, this is it's going to trigger all sorts of repercussions in the Middle East and unsettle everybody. He was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Quds Force. He was one of the most poisonous, dangerous people in the world, and Donald Trump had suddenly, you know, vaporized him. There wasn't nothing left except his signet ring, and
Yeah.
actually, it turned out to be an act of strength, and far from uh, causing chaos in the Middle East, it served to quieten things down, to put Iran back in its box. The point I make in Unleashed, and one of the points I make is that um, there's a lot of headless chickenism right now about the possibility of another Trump term, another Trump presidency. But when I look at what actually happened when I was foreign secretary, and then when I was prime minister, a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump did when he was in office was, in my view, eminently sensible and defensible, and that ranged from being very tough with Bashar al-Assad to giving the Ukrainians the the types of weaponry they actually needed, the shoulder-launched Javelin anti-tank weaponry. So, um, kind of one of the messages is, everybody's freaking out right now, but don't freak out, folks. Look at what actually happened.
Well, let me read from page 266 of Unleashed. It is hard not to like a man who was willing, in the defiance of so much polite opinion, to stick up for Brexit, and it was hard not to chuckle when the Prime Minister Theresa May arrived in the Oval Office, only for Donald to ask her in front of reporters why Boris Johnson was not the Prime Minister. That's very funny on pages 266 to 7. I don't know that endeared you to the former Prime Minister, your predecessor, immediate predecessor.
No, well, I guess it didn't, but I mean, I think that you see, the the Brexit experiment it's kind of widely misunderstood. It was supported by people on the left of the UK politics, as well as the Conservatives. It was supported by lots of people, lots of liberal people, as well as lots of Conservative people. It was basically about freedom. And if you look at the United States of America, I don't think the United States would ever compromise its sovereignty, its ability to do things independently, in the way that the European Union requires EU countries to basically be ruled from a foreign court, and a parliament that they don't control in Strasbourg. So, um, I was clearly thrilled when suddenly we had a United States president, and our most important ally, who supported Brexit, and uh, I couldn't hide it. Now, he was right. He was right, because it had, one of the key messages I try to get over in Unleashed is that when it came to it, when we faced COVID, and you asked earlier on about the technical problems we faced in COVID, we actually came up with a technical solution, and it was an amazing solution. We found a vaccine very, very fast, several vaccines, and thanks to Brexit, thanks to our legislative freedom, we were able to give approval to those vaccines, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, several others, before the 27 EU countries. And, I've got to tell you, that was a huge boon. It was a blessing for elderly and vulnerable people in Britain.
Unleashed is fabulous on a lot of accounts.
Well,
One
thank
of
you
them
so
is
much.
your description of Michael Barnier, and I have a very simple, direct question: who's worse, Barnier or Burrell? Because Burrell is driving me crazy.
But I don't know Burrell so well. And look, Barnier, he was funny. I actually got on quite well with him when he was the commissioner for finance in Brussels. He's a very kind of classic, austere French technocrat. He wears these very clean cut dove gray suits with a little floret of the Légion d'honneur in his lapel, and he was very he didn't like my approach to Brexit because I wanted complete legislative freedom for the UK. I wanted us to come out, and I wanted no more control from Brussels. And he said, "Well, you could do that, but then you couldn't expect to have access to EU markets." And I said, "Nonsense! It's nonsense. The Canadians have a deal with the EU where they have complete access to EU markets. They can they have a very very good free trade deal. Britain was not, so why shouldn't we be treated with the same friendliness as Canada?" And that was the argument, and it raged on for years and years, and finally we concluded it. But we concluded it on the terms that I wanted. And look, I think for American listeners, people got to understand Brexit. People think that the European project is kind of like the birth of the United States, and you're creating a single federal unit out of all these different countries in Europe. And to a certain extent, that's true. But what people forget, and that is true, but what people forget is that Britain is a very old parliamentary democracy where people believe that they've got to be able to kick out of office anybody who's in charge of them. That's the fundamental thing about democracy. You've got to kick the bastards out. And under the EU system, you can't do that. You don't know who they are. They're sitting in Brussels. They're in Strasbourg. Who the hell are these people? How do you remove them from office? They're making laws. They're passing judgments about your country, and you can't do anything about it. That was the problem. And I can tell you something, Hugh. There is no way this great United States of America would ever submit to sharing its sovereignty or any kind of thing like the European Union. No way.
Even when a justice of our Supreme Court cites international law, it's a controversy because we don't want to cite international law. We want to cite constitutional law. Mr. Prime Minister, I want to say a small note first. I am a huge fan of Patrick O'Brian, the Sea novels with Jack Aubrey and Stephen Maturin. I've listened to him twice. I have never known where Bob's Your Uncle came from. And it turns out, you educate me, that Bob Your Uncle is about Salisbury appointing Balfour to his government. Now, the only question I have, the O'Brien novels are set in the Napoleonic War, and Salisbury shows up after Disraeli. Do you think Patrick O'Brien didn't know the origin of Bob's Your Uncle? He just knew that it was used?
I think he may be guilty of an anachronism. I think he may be. I think we need to investigate that. Tragically, I don't think he's any longer around to.
No, he's not.
To tell
No,
us.
he's not. Now, explain to me.
You've spotted a historical anachronism in a Patrick O'Brien novel. That's detective work.
Well, I don't think anyone. You told me what Bob's Your Uncle. I just took it as a phrase that meant certain thing, and you explained it's actually.
It was true. The Cecils and the Salisbury, that family is, of course, the great. There was Robert Cecil, William Cecil, back in Elizabethan days. The Lord Burleigh, who was Queen Elizabeth's great chief minister for so many years, more than 50 years, and then his son Robert Cecil. They were the beginning of the dynasty, and then it emerges again, as you've just said, in the late 19th, early 20th century with Lord Salisbury, and then with A.J. Balfour. And it is true that that they were thought being Lord Salisbury's nephew was a good thing. Hence, Bob's your uncle.
Now, I got to tell people, they will laugh throughout Unleashed. For example, at the line, don't miss the Amal Clooney, wife of coffee ad man George. I just laughed out loud. So there, you were not afraid to be funny. I do want you, though, to explain to me the tutoring initiative and what it means. It was our job to get Jude the Obscure to Christminster. Because I tried to look up Christminster. It's not a college at Oxford or Cambridge. I don't know what
Okay,
we're
that's a
talking
Thomas
about
Hardy
there.
novel. Sorry, Hugh. Okay, right. There's a great Thomas Hardy novel called Jude the Obscure, which is
Right.
all
That
about
part
this
I got.
guy, the stonemason, right? You know all that. Okay, so he struggles. His great ambition in life is to get an Oxford education. Well, Christminster is what Thomas Hardy calls Oxford in the book. And
Ah,
yeah. So and it was so my ambition as Prime Minister of the UK was to to have opportunity everywhere. Look, the UK is very unlike America in this sense. It's massively successful economy, but it's very imbalanced. So London and the southeast are hugely productive, but when you go elsewhere, there are there are problems, and uh, there's less opportunity. Now, I believe all my observation tells me that actually human beings tend to have the same talents, the same energies, the same imagination, the same genius everywhere, right? In roughly equal proportions. If you drive around, and that's it's across the whole ecosystem. But the opportunity isn't as evenly distributed. And so my ambition with leveling up was to transform the UK, make it more like America. America has an amazing, rich, and varied sameness. Every state seems to have a great university. Every state seems to have some kind of tech sector. It's incredible the strength of this economy, and I wanted to unleash some of that in the UK as well. So it was about unleashing us politically from
well, I
the
thought it was
shackles.
you described learning loss better than any American has because you made it personal about the fifth grade boy who's looking at the girl and misses something that they'll never be clear about for the rest of their life. And I love the idea of leveling up in education. I'm not sure I like the tutoring initiative, but I do want to tell you my great
Why
grandfather's
not?
from St. Field in Ulster, and I went to Harvard. So it works in America. He had to leave Ireland to come here to get his great grandchildren opportunity. Has that changed in Great Britain?
Yes, it has. But the thing about the tutoring thing, why I cared about it, is that you see, a lot of the parents of the middle of the more affluent people have tutors, and they give their kids this advantage, and that's fine. But I wanted to try to help some of the kids who had potential but weren't getting the attention that they needed. And maybe we could have done it better. But all the evidence that I've seen from the academic literature is that tutoring is a very effective way of giving kids a chance and giving them a leg up. So that was what I wanted to do, and
It's
I
a
felt it
fabulous
very.
chapter.
I'm glad
Now,
you like.
Mr.
I'm
Prime
glad
Minister,
you.
I want to get to the hardest thing, which is
Yes, sir.
Afghanistan. When I read your
Yes.
line, Britain's fourth retreat from Kabul, I've actually read William Dalrymple and I've read a lot about the Afghan Brit wars, so I know what you mean. But did Joe Biden call you up before he announced the September 11th date? I've quoted on the show already today. Biden's statement sniffed out the last remaining Afghan faith in the U.S. and the West on page 586. Did he call you first?
Well, if you remember what happened, he'd made various announcements, but we never thought that it would happen as fast as it did, and we didn't think it would happen so unconditionally. Because if you remember the Doha deal with the Taliban made all sorts of conditions
Yeah.
about U.S. withdrawal, and those were certainly not fulfilled by the Taliban, by the other side. I mean, they kept attacking, they kept doing all sorts of things in breach of the agreement. And yes, so look, I mean, I think it's fair to say that America's allies were taken aback by the speed with which it happened. And I think there was a call between me and Joe. I can't remember whether he called me or I called him. I think I called him actually because we were so concerned about what was happening. And Look, I mean, one thing I'll say about Joe Biden, I think once he gets an idea in his head, he really really sticks with it, and he just got it in his head that there was no point in being in Afghanistan at all, and our guys, and I think the U.S. defense guys thought that that would be a mistake, and we tried to say that, but we were unsuccessful, and without a U.S. presence, our logistically, militarily, the UK presence wasn't viable, and that was why we saw the terrible scenes that we did in Kabul.
Well, let me
And
talk to
it's
you
very
about
sad. It's
the
really,
Tory
really
party.
sad. It's so yes. So
Let
go
me
on,
talk to
Hugh.
you about the
Yes.
Tory party. At one point, you said if someone put a gun to your head, you would have said, Rishi's going to be my successor. Well, he ended up being your successor, one removed after Liz Truss. But you were talking to him about slaying sacred cows, and on page 486, you write, I gawped at him and then I twigged. I have no idea what that means. Gape? But what does twig mean?
Twigged means I understood. I grasped. I twigged. You twigged something. Maybe I'm sorry. Don't you not have that in America? I twigged.
No, we don't.
I cottoned on. Did you say I cottoned on?
Yeah. Oh, you call him Dom all the time, and you call Rishi. I think any American will love this memoir, by the way, because you
Oh,
are
good.
deeply versed in British history and in American colonial history and all that good stuff. But I know what the argument's going to be among American conservatives. I didn't think you were a Thatcherite. Not many of my pals thought you were a Thatcherite. We love Brexit. We're all in for Brexit. But I don't like the Green New Deal. In fact, Donald Trump on this show, I've interviewed him 30 times. The one thing he didn't like about you is that you went all in on the Green New Deal. Are you still all in on the
Yeah.
Green New Deal?
Well, Thatcher was the one who gave the great speech in 1998. 1988, when she was the one who sounded the alarm about global warming. You should read that Thatcher speech to the Royal Society, where she really really lays it on the line about the threat to the planet. So Thatcher herself was the author of a lot of this, or the first UK politician really to take it seriously. My view is that I'm kind of with Elon Musk on this. I think that it's a fixable problem, and I think that capitalism and technology are going to fix it. And I think that we can do it in a sensible way that will generate huge numbers of good jobs for Americans, for the people in Britain. So that's where I come
Have you
from.
met Doug Burgum, our governor from North Dakota, who might be our Secretary of State? Because I spent 3 hours with him, and he knows this stuff cold, and he believes in small modular reactors as the
Yes, I
future,
agree with
not
that.
wind.
I agree with
Did
that.
you
Well,
get one
I agree on
built?
We never did. So I worked so hard on the SMRs, the small modular reactors, as you know. We have them in the UK. We have the propulsion units from the Rolls Royce um, nuclear submarines. So we have the ability to have a big rollout of SMRs. But and they kept coming into my office with beautiful models of SMRs, with showing how they could be. You just put one in your backyard; it would be fantastic. But it's for some reason it's taken a very long time to get the authorizations, the protocols. Nuclear safety is extremely important, clearly, but we're getting there. I'm confident that SMRs will be a big part of the solution. But
Let me
we need our
close with
government.
some Tory politics issues. I believe I've been persuaded by Unleashed that Dominic Cummings undid you. And it's because the Guardianistas caught him. I believe the story he told. I also think you're onto something about when someone has to go through public humiliation, it changes them. Do you talk to him ever?
No, it's look sadly. I think politicians have got to take responsibility for what happens on their watch, right? I was the prime minister, and advisors can kind of say stuff and propose stuff, but in the end, you take the decisions. I've got to carry the can for what happened, and I think the problem really, and I'm not disagreeing uh, with some of what you say, but the problem, looking back on it, was that COVID made it impossible for me to talk to my backbenchers in the way that I really needed to do.
Oh,
Being a mayor of London, I had complete authority. I didn't have to worry about the guys behind me. Being a prime minister, Tory prime minister, is very different. Different because it's not like being a president. You know, those guys can remove you, and I wasn't able to see them for like 18 months or whatever. You know, do you remember that whole nightmare? And
Yeah.
I think that was very damaging, particularly since we'd been in power for so long. And you know how Tory politics works, or all politics. The longer the party is in power, the more disappointed their people there are knocking around on the backbenches. The more people who've been sacked, who feel they're never going to get anywhere, who just want change, any kind of change, even get their party out of office so that everything can be renewed and they can start again. And that was one of the problems I faced. But
Well, you did
it
note
was
in the
my
book
fault.
in Unleashed that you were blessed with the greatest opponent in Jeremy Corbyn that could possibly be. But I want to ask you about, well, one more policy failure, which I did not find in Unleashed. How is it after 12 years of Tory government, the BBC still exists as an arm of the Labour radicals?
I don't know, Hugh. It's unbelievable, and you know, I put I we just I couldn't get them to change, and they look. I mean, it's a great corporation. It produces many wonderful programs and much wonderful stuff, but it is essentially a taxpayer-funded news gathering organization, and a taxpayer-funded news gathering organization is going to have an inherent bias to the left, and I'm afraid it still does. And I didn't have time to fix it. I don't think. I think the license fee, the tax, is not immortal. It will have to go one day because it's crazy, and um, that will. But what you don't want to do is stop the BBC from producing many of the beautiful things that it does. You know, the BBC produced Top Gear and David Attenborough and all sorts of, and the Proms and
Oh,
all
it's just
sorts of
their news
wonderful things.
organization I hate. I just hate their
That's
news
right.
organization. They hate Israel.
Well,
By the way, your
I
most
understand.
moving section in Unleashed is where you bring Bibi Netanyahu in and you pretend it's Balfour's desk and you pretend it's his pen and then Bibi catches on. But your support for the state of Israel is obviously deeply seated. Even in the
It is.
diplomatic niceties of the Balfour Declaration, you are obviously a friend of the Jewish state. And I
It
loved
is.
your
It
line,
is.
your best line. You had the foresight to scatter your ancestors all over the world. I had no idea until I read Unleashed that you are really mongrel.
I am. I am. And, you know, I've got some English there, and and heaven knows what else. But you know, I've got French, Russian, uh, Turkish, you name it, Jewish, the whole lot. And you know, I'm proud of it.
Well, I'm very proud that you stuck up for the Dursleys' house, number one. So everyone who loves Harry Potter is going to love the fact that you stuck up for the Dursleys' house, even if we don't like the Dursleys. But you also said something that's profound and it applies to America. It's on page 470. It is very difficult in the United Kingdom to do anything fast and at scale. Well, unless America does some things fast and at scale, and unless our allies do some things fast and at scale, China's century is dawning. Can we change in time? We don't want a dictator. We don't want Xi Jinping. Can we get
No, no.
out of this bureaucratic morass?
Look, I mean, here's the incredible thing about your country. I used to be a citizen of the United States because I was born here, but it's it's still 25% of world GDP, right? Uh, Contrast American growth rates with European growth rates in the last 15 years. America is astonishing. Look at the growth rates today are pretty impressive, in spite of everything. And you go around America, everywhere you go, as I was saying to you earlier on about leveling up, there is innovation taking place. There are people with um, ambition, aspiration, who are doing this. And I tell you something else, Hugh. Former prime minister, you fly over a lot of countries. You have a lot of time to. You have the luxury of looking out of the window, and I look out of the window of the planes, and you know the thing about the United States of America is that this country is not only immensely rich and temperate and fertile and full of brilliant, beautiful cities everywhere, but it is, by comparison with China, by comparison with India, by comparison with Europe, Western Europe, it is massively underpopulated. and the 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 space. Or I'm saying I don't want a place to be overdeveloped, but the space for Americans to develop and grow their economy and achieve their dreams is enormous. And so I don't
Well, Elon
believe
Musk
that.
is inspiring all of us. Mr.
He
Johnson, I got
is.
to
He is.
close with this. Are you going to try for number 10 again?
The answer, Hugh, is contained in the pages of Unleashed. I think the answer is you should only do things in politics if you genuinely think that you can be useful. It's what Her Majesty, Her late Majesty, the Queen, said to me, and I think that's true. And at the moment, the most useful thing I can do is kind of set out my plan that I had for the UK, what we were trying to do, and what Brexit was about, and what levelling up is about. And thanks for giving me the chance to explain it today.
Well, Unleashed is a fabulous book. I hope everyone goes and reads it. And Mr. Prime Minister, come back anytime you would like. It's a great honor to talk to you. Congratulations on your many achievements. And man, you can write. I'm not going to ask you to recite ancient Greek, and do the Aeneid again or whatever it was that stunned me when you. I don't know your memory. Your memory is a gift from God. But God bless it, and thank you for Unleashed.
Thank you, Hugh. Thanks for having me on. Take care. Cheers.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.